again. Never should it happen again.
Now, for our talk today, we visit the female slave dungeon. From there, we have a look at the room of no return and see the door of no return. After that, we have two separate cells here. We'll have an experience of it. And if time allows us, we'll take a look at the governor's residence. But before we do, let me give you a brief history into the background of this place. This castle was built by the Portuguese in 1482. Now, the Portuguese were here in 1471 for two main reasons. One, as missionaries, that is to spread Christianity, and also as traders. Now, the system of trade we had at the time was barter, that is the exchange of goods for goods. So whilst they were coming from Europe, they came along with some European items like gunpowder, spirituous liquor, enamel bowl, matches, mirror, in exchange for our gold, ivory, and later on they went into spices. Now, the major commodity they were interested in at the time was the gold. And incidentally, the rate at which the locals here were giving them this precious gold in exchange for their European goods gave them the idea that there were lots of gold here. For that reason, they named this place Elmina. The Elmina in their language means the mine. But the locals here, unfortunately, couldn't pronounce the word well, therefore corrupting it into Elmina. This does not in any way suggest that before the coming of the Europeans, we never had a name. No. At the time, our name was Anoma Onsa. Anoma Onsa literally suggests that when you drink, it doesn't get finished, or inexhaustible supply of water. Whilst the Portuguese were here trading in gold, there came the need for them to get a permanent place where they can keep their goods. So led by their captain at the time called Don Diego de Azambuja, they came to see the chief at the time called Nana Kwam Nansa, negotiated to have this plot of land and have the castle built. It is on record that the chief was hesitant in giving out the land, citing cultural differences to be a problem in the future. In fact, he even went on further to say that friends will be better friends if they don't stay or live together. But upon assurances and persuasions, he finally gave in. And that was the first time in the history of this world that a title to a plot of land would legally be transferred from an African chief to an European, and for that matter, the Portuguese. Vieira is a province in New Zealand. Now, he wrote this about a governor known as Tet. Tet arrived here in Ghana on the 16th of January, 1758. Died in the same year on the 12th of March at the age of 41. Now, what could the pastor say? All that the pastor is saying that this governor during the time of the trade was just, honest, respectful, and God-fearing. As to how honest, respectful, and God-fearing he was, only the pastor could possibly explain. And when Tet died, he was buried right over here. He died as a result of malaria or yellow fever. Seventh, when the Dutch took over, they were Protestants and never had anything to do with the Catholic Church. So rather, they divided it horizontally into two. The top one, they used it as officers' mess where they were eating and drinking. And the down one as hall of trade where the Africans were auctioned or sold. When the English got in here, they used it as classrooms. But now, it is a museum. We have the European cell. The one with the skull and the crossbone is a condemned cell for the Africans. Now let's get in here so I tell you the story. So you are all in a cell now. And this cell was for the Europeans. Some of the soldiers went out without permission, came back to the castle drunk, and started misbehaving. So they were arrested, put in here for some few hours, and later on released. And as you can see, because this was for the Europeans and no African was kept in here, look at how well ventilated the place is. The lights, the air. Yeah. From here, let's compare it to the next one, which was for Africans, and check out the difference. Now, we are in a condemned cell. And this cell was for the Africans. Those who fought for freedom. Their leaders were captured, brought in here, were not given food or water, kept in here till they died. And whilst they were in here, the only source of ventilation was up there. And over here too, when they were dead, they were thrown into the sea. Over here too, two receptacles or containers were provided, one at the corners on which they were expected to use to ease themselves or to go to toilet and to it. But they talk about the fact that staying here for a month, getting on to the next month, most of them became too weak to the point that they couldn't get up to use these containers. So practically, they ended up doing everything on the floor. So this floor you see here today is sometimes past used to carry feces, urine, vomit, and menstrual blood. And you seriously cannot underestimate the heat and the stench that was in here. And these, among others, explains why they were dying. And over here, to those that died were thrown into the sea. As you can see, there were no separate cell for kids. A child of below 10 years was in most cases put together to an adult and sold as a person. Those above 10 years were sold individually. So you can just imagine a child of below 10 years in this condition with the women here. Before the ship comes, most of these kids were already dead. From up there, he will look through and make selection. Now, the woman chosen could have been in the dungeons for days, weeks without cleaning herself. Yet the governor wanted her, so it became the responsibility of the soldier at the time to have the woman washed. How did he do that? He will fetch water from this wall. The woman is made to stand at the center of this courtyard and washed. Women from the other dungeons looked on. Now, after this humiliation, she is dressed up, offered something little to eat, at least to be strong. Then up on the stairs, here we call the private or secret access to the governor's bedroom. This woman is taken up there where the governor will use her. Now, after the governor has raped her or used her, she is brought back down into the dungeon. Instances where she could tell you that before she was brought down, she could have been used by some other guys also. And very few of them became mistresses and stayed a little longer out there. Those who became pregnant were subsequently free or liberated. But we need to know, most of these women did not only come from today's Ghana. Some came as far back as Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Togo, and Benin. So when she was finally free, she could not go back to where she came from. Secondly, the Europeans never wanted their babies to go anyhow. So some houses were built here in town where these pregnant women were kept. When they delivered, their babies were brought back into the castle and they were educated. So it is said that formal education started within the walls of this castle. And then sadly, some of these ones were educated to be used as a bridge between them and the Africans. And also the Europeans gave out names to their babies. And that is the genesis of most European names along the coast. So even here in Elmina now, we still have people who call themselves Da Costa, Da Silva, De Vere. And these balls were used to punish the women who were difficult to handle. Now, a woman difficult to handle will be the one who would resist, not allowing herself to be sexually abused or raped. So this woman is taken out of the dungeon, made to stand here. These had chains and shackles connected to it. So it was fettered to the legs of the woman. She was made to stand in the sun, in the rain, as long as they wanted. Now, they were doing all of this just to put fear in the others or break their spirit. So when next they call, they will be in haste to respond. This weighs 25 kilo. So you can just imagine two of it, one on the left, one on the right, on an empty stomach. There wasn't any way you could easily escape. It's meant to walk up to the governor's bedroom. Now after the governor has used her, she goes back to the dungeon through these same steps. So the governor was doing all of this at the blind side of the other occupants of the household. So there's a balcony on which the governor stood, gave an order for the women to be released here, from here, expanse here, then make their choice. Now, when you look down further, you could see some red cloth and chains over here. These are not the original cloth used by the captives whilst they were in here. In July 2015, we had a program here called The Return of the Slaves. By that, we had 48 Africans from all over the world who converged here just to reenact the story of the trade. Now, when they got in here, the first thing they did was to strip themselves off and had this covering their private parts. They put themselves back in chains and slept here over a night. Now, over the night period, if anyone wanted to visit the washroom, he or she was supposed to do it here as it happened. So what happened over the night period? In the morning, when this door was open, there wasn't any feces, no vomit, no menstrual blood, of course. But for urine alone, We all here couldn't stand the next 3 minutes. So what I began to tell people was that, you see, no matter how hard somebody will try to communicate to you the story of the trade, you cannot be in any position to truly comprehend what these ones endured over here. Now, a young lady at the center said in the middle of the night, she found herself wet. She knew very well that she hasn't passed any urine. Now, waking up to see what the problem was, there was this young guy who had wearied and it has dripped to where she was. Another guy also recounted that once he was here, he realized that the difference between somebody in prison and the one in dungeon will be the fact that the one in prison knows why he or she is there, and if there is any possibility when he or she is going to go out. But not the case for the one in the dungeon, because when he was first captured, he wasn't told the offense he committed, neither was he even told where he was being taken to. And that thinking alone, whilst the person is in here, could send him go crazy. The women who survived all this were put back in chains, led down this way through a point here we call the converging room, from there to the room of no return where they were given out to the boats. And at the time there were steps in here on which they descended. 600 of them led through this room we call the transit dungeon, from here to the converging room, from the converging room to the room of no return where they were finally given out to the boat. And for the men, when they got into the transit, some of them were branded. When I talk about branded, they have stamps with initials or symbols of these merchants, and these stamps were placed in a file later in that room over there. So that room later on became known as the branding room. Now when they take it out, they smear a little oil at the point they want to mark. Yeah, then they stamp it. Yeah, people were dying from the result of the shock or the pain. Those who survived were put together one to the other in the line of about 5, 10, and 15, and led through this way throughout to the final stage. So you could be here and see any of your relatives, being your father, mother, brother, sister, uncle, whoever it was. The best you could do is to cry and cry and cry and cry. And from here, you were led out into the final hall. Now over here to the entrance is short. So you are compared to Benga. So we are the final point in the whole process. But it was better walking down than staying in the dungeons, in your feces and your urine, in your vomit. Yeah, it was brutal at the dungeon, but I can tell you it was better in the dungeon than in the ships, where spaces could be between 25 to 30 inches high. People were made to lie side by side, unable to move, unable to sit up. Hands and legs were in chains and in shackles. Some of them were defecating, urinating, vomiting all over themselves. Instances where one could not even get his own hand to clean his own face because it is in shackles. And for some of the women, they were raped, sometimes up until the point of death. And it was just common and regular to wake up and see another person dead by you. For that, it was regular.
It was very touching. I've been looking forward to come to Elmina for a very long time, and I'm actually happy to be finally here. But when I walked through the gates here, I felt it within, like even when we were having the tour guide, I felt so sad. And when I heard what people went through in this room, in this castle, I was really touched. I almost cried to hear that some woman, hundreds of years ago, they walked past these gates and never to return home and never to see their kids. It's really sad. Yeah.
So I think all we can say is
Never should it happen again. Never should it happen again. I don't think we should, as a black people, allow this to happen ever again. Because if you imagine for 500 years, almost 12 million people were enslaved. Never to come back home to Africa again is so touching. I'm almost crying right now. It was really emotional for me, to be honest. Yeah.